when you show up to an incident, you can say, oh, hey, Doug, I know who you are. I know that we've done such and such training together. We're going to work great together when we get out here to the incident. And that's really, that you can't put a price on that, I don't think, when it comes time to respond.
Welcome to another CMC podcast. In this mini-series, I'll be sitting down with professionals who have very unique skill sets in the rescue industry. There should be some great takeaways from this for both you and your team. In this episode, I sat down with Christina Loomis, who's the administrative coordinator for the MABAS Division 4 and 5 Specialized Response Teams that's located in Lake and McHenry County, Illinois. Christina's been in this role now with the SRT for 6 years. And before joining the SRT, she worked as a fire department analyst for the fire department in Mount Prospect, Illinois. She holds a BA in urban planning from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana and a Master of Public Affairs from the Indiana University in Bloomington with a focus on local government management. Christina gives us a look into the daunting task of what it takes to coordinate the training and operations very smoothly between many different departments that are actually from 3 different counties in 2 different states. She talks about the economic advantages of the system that they use in this team, and then how they made the switch from 11 millimeter rope and associated equipment, and then not only how they elevate the skills of their team members, but how she assures that they maintain those skills. So welcome, Christina. A lot of our listeners may not be familiar with what MABAS is. Could you talk about what MABAS is?
Sure, absolutely. MABAS stands for Mutual Aid Box Alarm System, and it's a statewide organization throughout almost all of Illinois, and in fact, it has expanded into some of the neighboring states as well. And MABAS basically allows fire departments within Illinois to share resources for incidents that are large enough to that individual fire department can't handle it on their own. So MABAS allows them to predetermine ahead of time how to call extra resources, whether it's firefighters, equipment, vehicles, to come and help them. And so SRT is kind of an offshoot of MABAS. We operate under the MABAS model. Our membership is basically 2 MABAS divisions. So MABAS Division 4, which is almost all of Lake County, and then MABAS Division 5, which is all of McHenry County. And those 2 MABAS divisions are our primary members, and through them, we operate and help coordinate special teams for 45 fire departments.
Excellent. And then there's one cheesehead department involved in a Division 4, my old department, Pleasant Prairie. We were the lone group of cheeseheads in here. So
there is. I always have to remind everyone, not just northeastern Illinois, southeastern Wisconsin too. So.
And I think that's one of the great things that MABAS does is it really helps break down that border between states and between counties and municipalities. It really is a highly successful system.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it allows and kind of forces every fire department to say, I don't have to do this alone, right? If something overwhelms the resources that I have at my disposal in my own department, I can easily just call for help. And by having all of that predetermined ahead of time, those agreements worked out and figure out before you actually have the incident, it means when those resources are needed in that moment, everything happens very seamlessly.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. So can you give a kind of a brief history of the SRT team itself here?
Sure. So SRT started actually in Lake County, and it was it was really only a couple of teams when it started back in the late 1990s. And as the fire departments realized that they could work together more for the special teams, not just for the fires and EMS calls and all that kind of stuff, they continued to expand it. So it started in Lake County, and as we got more and more teams, then I think McHenry County saw the benefit of doing that as well and decided to join forces with the 2. So we used to be the Lake and McHenry County fire departments, specialized response teams, and about 6 years ago, SRT decided to go through a governance change and to better align itself with the MABAS model. And so we kind of switched. And instead of being Lake and McHenry County, we became MABAS Division 4 and MABAS Division 5. And we, on paper, split our teams into 2 so that all 7 of our special teams, now we had 14 teams between the 2 counties. And we continue to operate under SRT still as one team in each discipline. But yeah, we're managing all of that stuff for both counties counties and both MABAS divisions.
And you mentioned there's 7 different disciplines. Can you go through what disciplines that each county has?
Absolutely. So we have 5 primary teams. We have hazardous materials, we have technical rescue, we have wildland, we have our mechanics team, and then we have our water team, which actually has 3 teams within one. So we've got 3 disciplines, dive, sonar, and swift water.
And then within the TRT portion, that's rope, confined space, trench, and collapse,
Correct.
Structural collapse. Correct. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of specialties that really come together under the umbrella of the SRT then.
It is. There's, a whole range of stuff that we have to prepare for and then hopefully help our local departments respond to when that time comes.
So, and so you talked about how it was one team and then it split and it became 2. And the way that they kind of stay combined is that governance board. Can you talk about what the makeup of the governance board is and kind of how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So our governance board, we call it our Joint Administrative Council. We shorten that to JAC. And that basically is a board of 6 chiefs from our 45-member fire departments. There's 3 chiefs from each of our MABAS divisions so that we have equal representation on that board. And the way that we enacted all of our rules make sure that if we're going to make changes and if we're going to approve things, that all of that has to really be a majority of both MABAS divisions, not just a majority of the board. So it works out really well. It allows us to have a smaller group that we make our day-to-day decisions with. But all of our longer-term big kind of stuff that we have to prepare for, all that requires the approval of both of our MABAS divisions. So the JAC can make a recommendation in terms of what they want to do, but once it takes it to the next level, our annual budgets, our strategic plan, all that kind of stuff has to then get approved by both MABAS division boards. So it's really 45 fire departments that are going to make that decision together as a group.
Well, I'm sure some of our listeners too are when they hear, trying to get 6 fire chiefs to agree on something might be difficult. Now to get 45 to agree on something, at least a majority of the 45, I think listeners would think that could be tough, but I think that, and we were talking before we started the podcast here, that people do a really good job of checking their egos at the door here and truly come together for the good of the entire region.
They definitely do. I think that 99% of the decisions that we make or recommendations that we make from the JAC, all of those fire chiefs really have a lot of trust in that group, a lot of trust in our leaderships for all the teams that we're making wise choices. Not that there aren't ever any things that, we have to talk through and all that, but they do a really good job. And I feel like one of the differences, the fire department where I started with was in a different area, not in these 2 counties. And I feel like there was always a little bit sometimes in that area of a mentality of every fire department has to be prepared on their own. And when I came up to here, I think one of the most refreshing things that I've experienced has been the fact that all of these fire departments see the value in the combined efforts and their ability to rely on their neighbors for any types of specialized incidents. So they don't have that mentality coming in that I have to figure it out and do it all by myself. I feel like for the most part, they really, they like the ability to just call on their neighbors for whatever resources they might need.
And even with, to take 45 departments and narrow that down to 6, people on the JAC, it still takes somebody like yourself to be able to basically run all the day-to-day operations and to make all the cogs in this wheel work, basically, because there with 7 different primary disciplines and then sub-disciplines within that has the potential to be a nightmare. So can you talk a little bit more about what your position is actually with the team with the administrative coordinator?
Sure. I think to start with, whenever I say administrative coordinator, people are always like, what does that mean? And so I always equate it, if we were a nonprofit organization, I would be the executive director. And that's really kind of what my position is. So first and foremost, my position is to make sure that the governance of the organization works. So I do everything from preparing the packets for our board meetings and making sure all the issues get run through the board when that's appropriate, working with our team leaders to make sure all of that gets enacted as the board's policy is. But a lot of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is really the coordination of all of those teams. So it's making sure that when we have new team members onto our teams, that they meet all the qualifications, that they have all the training they need to get onto our teams. Once they're on teams, we coordinate all of the training for all the disciplines. So we have spelled out for each of our teams what the annual training requirements are, and it varies widely based on what that specialty is, and each team has their own little special things that have to take place. So it's coordinating all of that and then making sure that all of the team members meet those annual requirements so that we know that when they show up to an incident that they have those qualifications to get on the team, and then that they're proficient in their skills when they show up as well. It's also coordinating and managing all the resources and assets of SRT. So each of our teams has vehicles or trailers or containers and special equipment, all that stuff, and we have to make sure that everything is running smoothly and ready to go when there is an incident. So that's a lot of what I spend my day-to-day doing, is just kind of keeping track of all that, making sure that that teams are qualified, that they're trained, that the assets are ready, so that when the time comes, that we're going to be successful when we need it. So,
and there's a considerable amount of rolling stock between the two teams, and then inside of those containers and trucks they're very well equipped.
Absolutely. For TRT, for example, we've got 5 containers between the two MABAS divisions. And so, there's a lot of equipment in there that we have to make sure at all times that it's ready and that our team knows how to use it and all that. So there's a lot that goes into that to make sure that we're ready. So
yeah, and for our listeners, when we talk about containers, they're roll-off containers, and then they use hydraulic hook, and trucks. Then very similar to like a dumpster, except this is an enclosed container, and the concept has worked out extremely well, because now one chassis can haul different containers and do different things. So
yeah,
I'd say it's been a very successful concept. So you talked too about training, and I thought it was one of the things I always found was great is that the uniformity of training too between the divisions. So coming over the cheddar curtain, I could go to either a Division 4 training or a Division 5 training. They were interchangeable and they all counted towards your thing. So you've always encouraged people to train with each other and to kind of cross county lines, if you will, or division lines, to really keep it one large cohesive team, which has to be a challenge.
It definitely is. Each division for each of our special teams has their own team leadership group, but we have really practiced with them the art and the science of working together to make sure that whatever they're doing, like you said, that it's the same across the two counties, and we want to make sure that everyone is getting the same training. One of the big benefits of SRT that I don't think is always immediately obvious to everyone is the value of getting to know your other teammates from the other departments, because I think so many times we get so used to operating with our own little silos and our own little fire departments. But when we have these larger incidents, we have to have some trust that the people who are coming from those other fire departments, that they can work seamlessly with what we're doing. So that's really why everyone has to have the same qualifications. Everyone has to do the same training every year. And we encourage them to not just train at their own department, but to go to those other trainings for all those other departments, because that value of learning who your neighbors are, who are your teammates, so that you have that level of comfort, right? When you show up to an incident, you can say, oh, hey, Doug, I know who you are. I know that we've done such and such training together. We're going to work great together when we get out here to the incident. And that's really, that you can't put a price on that, I don't think, when it comes time to respond. So
right, and that goes far beyond SRT. I mean, that more routinely it would be at a structure fire or something like that.
Yep.
Just the people are used to working together and do so seamlessly.
Yeah, and I think the departments are used to working together on incidents, on fires, on EMS calls, all that kind of stuff. But what I think makes SRT a little bit more unique is that oftentimes for those fire incidents, you're mostly pulling right from your neighboring department. So you're seeing the same kind of people all the time. When you pull for an SRT box card and you need some kind of response for special teams, you could get someone in a Zion call from Huntley all the way across in McHenry County. And having that training together means that they all know how to work together as one. So
excellent. So what are some of your other, you kind of alluded to some of your responsibilities. What other, is there anything else that you have that you're by job description you're responsible for? And then we'll kind of go into how your position has evolved, if you will, well, since you've been here.
Sure. So other than that kind of day-to-day stuff, I'm also SRT is essentially its own little small business, right? So all the business end of everything that we do, whether it's, managing payroll, paying bills, all that kind of stuff, managing our lease here at the building that we operate out of, all that stuff has to be taken into consideration. And then really the big thing now, we a couple years ago went through a strategic planning process and really identified kind of long-term stuff. So it's really managing some of these projects then that will kind of move us forward as we go as well. So my job every day, I feel like looks different. It's never the same kind of stuff that we're dealing with, but it's fun. It's always something new. So.
Yeah, what were some of your initial goals that you were given when they hired you?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest things when I started was they were looking for more consistency. They felt like we didn't, while we had standard operating guidelines and rules in place, we didn't always follow them. And so we weren't maybe holding people accountable to their annual training, or we weren't consistently managing our maintenance schedule and things like that, all kinds of stuff. So really trying to get them into a place where much of what we were doing was in the 21st century, whether it was creating forms and sign-in sheets like that could be filled out on a computer instead of everything having to be done by hand. Holding people accountable to training, setting standards, and then saying, you have to do your training. If you don't, we're going to have to take you off of our rosters. And getting everyone used to that. Those first couple of years were tough as we got everybody to really understand and realize that we were serious this time, that we were going to do that. That was a huge undertaking to start with. And then really putting more processes in place in terms of the administration of the SRT. So our team leaders before that really were responsible for a lot of the administrative tasks. And one of my goals when I started was to take that load, that burden off of them. And I really wanted them to focus on the operations of the team and their responding and managing training, and less on all the administrative stuff. So taking that off their plates and just putting those processes into place so that everyone knows what to expect, how to do it. And I feel like it's really, those first few years especially, it made us a lot more efficient in doing the basic day-to-day stuff. So that was, but it was hard. It was hard to get, as you can imagine, when I started, there were probably 450 team members across all of our teams. And so 45 fire departments, it was even more then because we've lost a few. And all those team members all on the same page. It takes time. Change is hard for everyone. So.
And we were talking here before we started the podcast. I can remember when after the first year Christina was here, she had the unfortunate position of kind of being the hammer when it came to the training, because they told people, hey, we're going to hold you responsible. You need to come to the minimum number of trainings for each discipline you belong to, and if you don't, you're not going to be on the team. And then when reality hit, and that really happened, there was a few people that were like, what?
Yeah.
And but it didn't take long, and I think you do an excellent job too, because you send out so many reminders. Everyone knows right where they're at. I'm still on the email list, so I still kind of get to see what she's doing here, because I think it's just such a great example to keep people, and by you being the central clearinghouse of all that, the consistency that affords all the teams, it has to just be phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it's made a difference in that. Now we're really able to focus on team operations and how do we improve our teams and get to a level that we really couldn't do before, because none of these processes and none of that consistency was in place before. So it allows us to start looking toward the future, which we just didn't have the capacity to do that before, for sure.
So you mentioned the strategic planning process. So if you don't mind sharing, what are some of the things that are in that plan?
Yeah, so we had the fortune to get a retired professor to come and spend a day with us outlining kind of what do we think we're going to be and where should we be in 5 years from now. So that was really kind of the overall goal of what we did in the plan. So some of the things that we identified in there, we've got some big projects. One of them is really educating people about who we are and what we do. For years and years, SRT has obviously operated, but we've always kind of done so under the radar so that no one really knew we even existed. And in some ways, that's a good thing. It means that we're able to kind of do our business and things run smoothly. But on the other hand, as we look to the future and needing to replace capital items and all that kind of stuff. We need to be able to educate people about what we do and the value that we provide. SRT in the future, we've been fortunate for the past 20 years to get a lot of equipment donated from corporations, from MABAS, Illinois, all those different areas. But now we're getting to the point where all that stuff has got to be replaced, and it's not going to just happen, not going to just be given to us as it has in the past. So how do we look to that in the future? So education, figuring out kind of our capital replacement plan is a big thing that we're working on right now. We just issued a draft plan that will kind of look at, for the next 5 years, what are the things that are really going to be priorities for us to make sure that our teams are equipped. So that's one item. We've been working for the past year on inventories. We've never had a really good inventory system in place, which I feel like is a common story for fire departments in general. But if you magnify what a fire department has times all of this, it was a massive undertaking for us to do. So that's been a big thing. Expanding our team leadership. So all of our teams used to basically just have a team leader for the most part. And we've wanted to grow our team leadership so that we get more ideas, and also so that we can do succession planning for the future, so that when our team leaders decide to move on to retire, that we have someone, in the reins ready to take that over as well. So really these kind of big things that have been in the works and kind of on people's brains for a while, but we put it to paper, and it's amazing now the things that we can get done because of that, for sure. So
I know one of the things that a lot of our listeners will be interested in is you're kind of in process of making that switch from half-inch rope to 11 mil rope and equipment. And I know that's a pretty major undertaking, especially when you look at 45 member departments. So what's been your part of that?
Yeah. So, really this comes back to our strategic plan, in that we said we need to know what we have, we need to know what condition it's in, and we need to know what we need for the future, so that we can plan for replacing stuff that is outdated and needs replacing, and then identifying holes. So one of the things that we identified when we inventoried our technical rescue equipment was that our rope was sorely out of date and way past when it probably should have been replaced, which we had in multiple areas in different teams. And so, I think the fact that we've gone through this process, then when they came up here, we expanded our leadership group, and we brought in some people that are instructors, specifically rope instructors for some private companies and things. And they looked at this and said, if we're going to do this, probably now is the best time to think about, is this the model we want moving forward? And so they brought it to our Joint Administrative Council and said, we'd like to make the switch from half-inch to 11 millimeter. And it's where the industry standard is going to now. And we have all this money in the budget this year. Let's make sure that we are making the right move. And obviously that impacts all of our fire departments, because they have equipment for their individual team members, not just what we provide, because we provide a lot of the equipment, but also fire departments, totally depending on the team, there's specific things that those departments have to provide. So, we got our council to sign off on them making that switch officially. We made a notification out to all of our fire chiefs to let them know that we were doing this, let them know what the impact would be on their team members, and to recommend what equipment they might need at their individual departments to replace as well, so that they're compatible. We'll still have some of our half-inch rope that we're going to have to replace still over the next couple of years, but this is going to be a huge portion of it. And so, it's kind of a big move for them. But the team leaders made a great case to our Joint Administrative Council, and they really do look to our team leaders to make those recommendations to us when we need to change operations. And what I was saying before, where in the beginning, probably this is not something we would have ever undertaken, because we wouldn't have had the capacity to really focus on that operations. But we're in a good place now where we can kind of start planning things for the future there. So,
and I think it's that like you said, the willingness of the leadership to listen to the team leaders and see what is out there that's really helped keep this team on the cutting edge, and really to be able to deliver the high level of service that it does. Yeah.
We have amazing team leaders. We have great team members as well, so many of who stay on top of that. My area of expertise is not in any of these teams, right? My job is really to coordinate and administer the organization itself, but they really stay on top of that stuff. And For several years, we've made recommendations as part of our budget process and all kind of stuff. And the council members have always been very supportive of that. And they see the value in these are the guys that are doing the work and they know, what we need to do. So. Well,
and I think too, you hit on something really important that I think might be interesting to our listeners too, is that you don't have a background in technical rescue or in the fire service other than you worked for the fire department or you were not a firefighter, but you were brought in because of your specific skill set, and it has enabled the team to really, expand and do a lot of things that they're doing now at the level they're doing it at. So I think a lot of people are saying, okay, how do we get a Christina on our team? And ultimately, some of that I think is the biggest the biggest obstacle in a way is financing. And we kind of talked before the podcast too, where each county might not be able to do this individually, but because Division 4 and 5 or Lake and McHenry County work together, they're able to kind of do that. So can you talk about kind of how your position is funded? And maybe we can throw that out as an example to some other teams and some other listeners as to how they can make this happen for their team.
Absolutely. So the SRT as a whole is funded 100% right now through member dues every year. So when we go through our budget process and we develop what we need to operate for the year for all of our teams, and then the administration portion, which is primarily me, although obviously there's some other administrative expenses as well, but we recommend that. And as part of that recommendation, we tell the MABAS divisions, this is what it will cost you to fund this for the next year. And if they approve the budget, then they go out and they assess dues to their member agencies as well. So really, it's the power of those 45 fire departments together. We like to say all the time that SRT is like a low-cost insurance policy, right? You hope that you won't need it, but for a few $1,000s every year, you're able to get all the resources of SRT, and then my position, which really is in charge of coordinating all of that. So it's really through that we're able to accomplish that. Moving forward, as I mentioned before, with our capital and things like that, we know that we have to get a little more creative and look to some other options for, funding that big stuff. But for the day-to-day stuff, we've really been able to maintain that. And we've even lost a couple of fire departments through consolidation and things over the past couple of years, but we've still been able to maintain that. And it really is because of the scale of the organization that it affords us that. So. And
I know that obviously the dues can change, from year to year, depending upon how the allotments are per county, but can you kind of give a ballpark figure of what the dues are per department?
Yeah, so it varies a little bit because we use a formula to assess both MABAS divisions differently, but depending on thing, I would say right now for probably next year, it will be maybe between $6,000 and $6,500 a year. So,
which is if our listeners were able to see the amount of rolling stock and like I said, the number of technicians on this team, that is unbelievably cheap.
Yeah, we really feel like there is not a lot of value that is better than what can we provide. And I think so much of it comes back to the fact of everyone's willing to work together, and by pooling all their resources, it doesn't have to be a significant impact to the budgets, but you have to have the group willing to all work together and be on the same page with it. So
yeah, and then obviously on top of the dues, then each department is responsible to take care of their own technicians that are on the team.
Yep.
From a paying for initial training and wages, backfill, and so on. That's in addition to, but it's still a very cost-effective program.
Absolutely. I know each department, depending on the number of team members they have and what teams they're on, that cost varies. And but we have everything from the small, completely volunteer department that literally has no team members because they have all part-time people and they don't have anyone to go through all of that, up to a decent sized city that has a lot of team members. So we have everything in between, and as long as everyone continues to pay their dues every year, and then on top of that, we still need most departments to want to contribute team members, but as long as that happens, the system, it works well. So
very good. So what's in the future? You have the strategic planning process, but what else do you see as the future of the Division 4 and 5 SRT?
Yeah, I really think that as we go through the strategic plan, we're right now in the process of developing promotional videos to educate everyone about what we do and how we do it so that we can seek funding from other whether it's county government or private foundations, there's a lot of options out there, but we need an easy way to get across what we are and what we do. And so we're working through that right now. We're working through our first capital plans that we can start developing and preparing to save for the replacement of our capital assets. And that has absolutely, required us to look at what we have, what's essential to the operations, and then are there new ways of doing things? So that's been a big topic of conversation. And we've really taken a lot of time over the past couple years, especially to go through all of our operating guidelines and make sure that we're on the forefront of where we need to be in terms of doing all that. But I really think that the future for us beyond even that is going to be just really continuing to delve into the operations and looking around the country and seeing if there's other areas that are doing things differently than us, and can we learn from others to continue to get better, to keep planning for the next generation and recruit new members. That's something right now that is definitely a challenge for many departments, is wanting new firefighters who start to want to be part of SRT and get involved in that. And obviously, we're only going to be successful as long as people want to still join our team. So I really see us as looking at what we have and who we have on our teams and how do we make sure that they're going to be successful, moving forward. So.
Excellent. Well, I think, and I'll be the first to admit I'm somewhat biased, being I had the fortune to be part of the team here for quite a few years before I retired. I think there's a lot of really great things within this organization that our listeners can learn from, and really looking forward to you to be able to listen to this and hear some of the ideas that Christina has talked about, and hopefully this can help your team, and maybe looking towards your neighbors and forming something like this, or at least kind of combining forces to be able to expand your team's capabilities. So I'd like to thank all of our listeners again, and we'll put a link on the podcast page at cmcpro.com so you can go and you can log into the Division 4 and 5 webpage and learn more about the team. So thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned for another CMC podcast.